Hey guys, welcome to this section. In this section, we're going to go over operators, and the first set of operators we're going to be looking at are arithmetic operators. Right here, I have a comment with those operators, and let's quickly go over them so that you get familiar with them, right? So we have the addition, which is this sign which we have used before to concatenate strings. We have the minus, we have the multiplication, the division. The modulus is the remainder of a division. Say 2 divided by 2, remainder is 0. 3 divided by 2, remainder is 1. And we have the increment, and this one, what it does is increments a variable by 1. And we have decrement, which decrements a variable by 1. And the arithmetic operators are basically used to perform some kind of mathematical operation on some values. So with this, let's do some examples and so that you get a feeling for them. So let's do a console that right line. Let's say we want to add 5 plus 5 minus 2, right? And then let's say we have, so that I'm gonna have an example. So whenever we don't use variables, or whenever we have like hard-coded values, these are hard-coded values, right? It's like the value you put in there and it doesn't actually change. So I'm going to create 3 variables. So I'm going to say number 1, and I'm going to set it equals to 5. I'm going to say number 2, and I'm going to set it equals to 5. And I'm going to say number 3. And this one I'm going to set it equals to 2. And what I want to do is I want to do a console right line, and I want to have the same, I'm going to be using the same operators for these, just to prove that we're going to get the same answer. Oops, okay, I left the space there. Just to prove we have the same answer, that this would have the same answer as this, because variables at the end of the day, they just represent some value, right? So let's run this real quick. Okay, so it's up, and then we get 8, right? 5, 5, 10, and minus 2, 8. Cool. All right, so we're using plus and minus. Now let's use what do we want to use? Let me get rid of some of this. Get rid of this one. And let's do multiplication and minus. That's okay. Just so to try different things. So this is 25 minus 2 is 23. Cool. All right. Let's try the modulus. And something really cool we can do is, how do we know whether a number is odd or even? Is we divide by 2, and if the remainder is 1, we know it's an odd number, and if the remainder is 0, we know it's an even number. So let's try that. So let's make this let's get rid of this guy, and let's do modulus. So we're doing number 1, modulus of 2. This is how you pronounce that. This is expected to get 1, right? Because 5 divided by 2 has a remainder of 1. There you go. Now if we do, like, say 6, this should be remainder of 0. And this is how we know if a number is even or odd. Okay, now let's try the increment. The increment increments the number by 1. So the value by 1. So say we have this number 1 variable that is equals to 6. So the way to do that is, let's say number 2 is going to get the result of that. So let's put it number 1 plus plus. So here's the deal. So this is called a post increment, meaning it's going to add 1, but it's going to add 1 after that operation, meaning in this line this is still going to be 6, but after this it's going to be 7. To prove that, I'm going to print number 1, and then I'm going to print number 2. So number 1 should be 7 by the time it reaches here, but by the time we assign this here, since this is a post increment, this is still 6. All right, so let's run that, and this is what we expected. We expected number 1 to be 7 by the time it gets here, but then since we assign it here, it's still 6 at this spot, right? Now let's do, and the minus is the same thing. We can do minus minus, and this should be 5 and then 6, right? Because that's a post increment and post decrement. So if we do it before the variable, that means it increments first and then it assigns a value to that variable. So in this case, number 1 and number 2 are going to have the same result. So if we run this, it's going to be 7. And if we do minus minus, we're going to have 5, 5. Okay, and like I said, all this does is increments by 1 and decrements by 1. So if we were to write this thing, and you don't need to assign it to, we can just put it like this, and this should be the same thing. So if we run this, it should be 5, right? Because this value itself changes. So this is equivalent, and I'm going to write a comment right here. This is equivalent to saying number 1 equals to number 1 minus 1. Those two things are equivalent. So say we do number 1 plus plus. This is equivalent to saying number 1 equals to number 1 plus 1. And in this case, this is going to be 6. So if we run it, we get 6. So now let's try to break this thing out so that you understand completely how this works. So if I say number 1 is equals to number 1 plus 1, right? This is like saying, hey, this is a variable where I want to store this thing, and this is equals to number 1, and number 1 in this case is 6. So this is like saying 6 plus 1. Just so that you see it more clear. And then this thing lets us even make it more yeah, it makes it truncated even further if we want to do it, because there's different ways to have this syntax, but it all means the same thing. It's just shorter ways to, you know, assign values and increment and decrement and all this stuff, just to make it easier for us. And this is actually a nice segue to the assignment operators, which, as you saw in that little tooltip that I was showing just a second ago, these are the assignment operators. So this assigns a value to a variable. This adds some value and assigns it to the variable. This is plus minus, plus equals, minus equals, and so forth for the next ones. So now let's do some examples. Of course, we have used the assignment operator. So let's say number equals to 5. Right? Now if we do number plus equals to say 5, or let's say 4, this essentially means number is equals to number plus 4. This is essentially what it means. So if we do a console, that right line, and we print number, we are going to get 9. Okay, we get 9. And honestly, once you understand 1, it's the same for all of these other ones. So if we do minus equals, this is like saying minus here. So essentially is 5 minus 4, which is 1. Let's run that real quick, but that's 1. And so on and so forth. So if we do multiplication, it's going to be 20. If we do division, it's going to be some number. And modulus is going to be some number. So all it does is does the operation and then assigns that value to the variable. Next one we're going to be looking at is the comparison operators. And these are used to compare values. Let's say 2 equals means equals to. So let's say 5 equals to 5. This is the equals. This is not equals to. Say 3 is not equals to 4. This is the greater than. So 10 is greater than 5. Less than is 5 is less than 10. Greater than or equals means 10 is greater than or equals to 5. That's true. And 10 is greater than or equals to 10. That's also true, right? And then same thing with less than or equals to. Now let's do some examples so that you guys get more familiar with how this works. So let's do 3 numbers again. So let's say this is number 5. This is number 5. And then this guy, let's make it number 10. So if we do a console, that right line, and we say number 1 is equals to number 2, we expect this to be true because number 1 is 5 and number 2 is 5. So let's run this. And as expected, we get true because 5 equals to 5. Let's say we do number 1 equals number 3. We should be getting false here because 5 does not equals to 10. So we do get false. Okay, let's try not equals. So number 1 is not equals to 3, number 3, which 5 is not equals to 10. This is true. They're not equals. They're not equal. So it's true. Okay, let's do other ones. So number 1 is greater than number 3. And this is going to be false. Nice. All right. Let's now try number 1 is greater than or equals to number 2. So this is number 1 is greater than or equals to number 2, which is 5 greater than or equals to 5. And this should be true because even though 5 is not greater than 5, but they are equal. So that's the catch here. So this is true. And if we do number 3 greater or equals to number 2, this should also be true because 10 is greater than 5. So the last operators we're going to be looking at are the logical operators. And this is the AND, this is the OR, and this is a NOT. So the AND returns true if both of these statements are true. The OR returns true if only one of the statement is true. And the not is basically their reverse. It returns false if the result is true, and it returns true if the result is false. So let's go back to our console.writeLine, and let's try this out. Say we do 5 equals to 5 and 6 is greater than 5. If we run this, so we know this is true and we know this is true, and the and needs to returns true if both of these are true. So in this case, if we run this, we should see it true. Now, if one of them is false, say we change this to 0, and we say that 5 equals to 0 and 6 is greater or equals to 5, this is going to return false because one of them is false. So this is false. And if we put both false, it's still going to be false. Let's try now the OR operator. So let's go back to the first example. 5 equals to 5 and 6 is greater than 5. These are both true statements. So if we run this, we should see it true. Okay. Now if we change this to 0, this makes 5 equals to 0 false. But 6 is still greater than 5, so one of them is true. And the OR operator, as long as one of them is true, is going to be true. So if we run this, we're going to get it true. Now if we make both of these false, say we make this less than 5, this is false and this is false. So false or false is false. Now with the not, let's try creating a variable. Let's say we do boolean my bool, and we set it equals to true. So if we print boolean, we're just going to get true, right? So if we run this right now, we'll see true. But now with the not, it will change it to be the opposite. So if we put the not in front of it, this is going to be false. Because it was true, so not true is false. And if we change this and make this false, not false is true. Okay. How about if we do, say, let's use parentheses, say 0 equals to 0. So this is true, but we're negating whatever we are evaluating here. So this is true, and not true is false. So this is how the not operator works. So with this, we have reached the end of this section. Make sure you practice. Try to get these down so that you really understand how they work, because a lot of stuff builds on top of this. Be sure you're solid with this before you move on. The next video, we're going to be talking about conditions and just how if statements and else if and else and all this stuff. So you need to have this solid. I'll catch you guys in the next one. If you have any questions, just drop the comments below and I'll try to answer them as soon as I can.